The morning of March 8, 1862, dawned calm and clear over the waters of Hampton Roads in Virginia. A gentle breeze rippled the surface of the estuary where the James River meets the Chesapeake Bay. To the casual observer, the scene appeared peaceful, but beneath the surface tension was mounting to a breaking point. The Union Navy had established a formidable blockade consisting of powerful wooden warships that choked off the Confederate supply lines. Sailors on the decks of the United States Ship Cumberland and the United States Ship Congress went about their daily routines, washing clothes and polishing brass. They believed their massive batteries of cannons were invincible against any threat the rebels could muster from the nearby Elizabeth River. They were wrong. Suddenly, a lookout on the United States Ship Union spotted a strange trail of black smoke rising above the tree line to the southwest. A signal flag went up alerting the fleet to an approaching vessel, but this was no ordinary ship. Emerging from the river mouth was a monstrous black shape that looked like the roof of a submerged barn floating on the water. This was the Confederate States Ship Virginia, formerly known as the Merrimac. It had been salvaged from the depths, cut down, and plated with layers of heavy iron armor. It moved slowly and ominously toward the wooden fleet powered by straining engines that belched dark clouds into the sky. The sailors on the Union ships stared in disbelief at the iron beast. The stakes could not have been higher for the United States Navy or the government in Washington. If this armored behemoth could destroy the blockading squadron, it would open the port of Norfolk to the world. A victory here meant the Confederacy could receive vital supplies and weapons from Europe, potentially altering the outcome of the entire Civil War. Furthermore, there was nothing stopping such a vessel from steaming up the Potomac River and shelling the capital city itself. The wooden walls that had defended nations for centuries were about to be tested against a new era of industrial warfare. The fate of the Union blockade, and perhaps the Union itself, hung in the balance on this spring afternoon. As the Confederate States Ship Virginia closed the distance, the Union ships opened fire with everything they had. Thunderous broadsides erupted from the Cumberland, and the Congress sending hundreds of pounds of iron hurling toward the attacker. The crews cheered as they saw their shots strike home, but their joy turned to horror instantly. The heavy cannonballs simply bounced off the sloping iron casemate of the Virginia, splashing harmlessly into the sea. The Confederate Ironclad did not waver in its course. It continued its relentless approach, ignoring the storm of shot and shell raining down upon it. The era of the wooden warship was ending before their very eyes, shattered by the reality of iron armor. The Virginia steered straight for the United States Ship Cumberland, a sailing sloop of war packed with heavy guns. The Confederate commander, Franklin Buchanan, was determined to ram the enemy vessel. With a sickening crunch, the iron ram at the bow of the Virginia smashed into the wooden hull of the Cumberland below the waterline. The impact was so violent that it nearly submerged the bow of the ironclad. As the Virginia backed away, it left a gaping hole in the side of the Union ship. Water rushed into the Cumberland at a terrifying rate, yet her crew continued to fight bravely, firing their guns until the water rose over the decks. Within minutes, the United States Ship Cumberland listed heavily and began to sink, taking over 100 men down with her. The sight of such a powerful warship being destroyed with such ease sent a shockwave of panic through the rest of the fleet. The Virginia then turned its attention to the United States Ship Congress, which had run aground in its attempt to escape. The ironclad took up a position off the stern of the Congress where the Union guns could not bear and began to mercilessly pound the wooden ship with explosive shells. The carnage on board the Congress was indescribable as splinters and shrapnel tore through the crew. Helpless and burning, the Congress struck her colors and surrendered. As night fell over Hampton Roads, the scene was apocalyptic. The burning wreck of the Congress cast a blood-red glow across the black water, illuminating the victorious ironclad lurking in the darkness. The United States ship Minnesota, another powerful steam frigate, had also run hard aground while trying to engage the enemy, and now sat helpless awaiting destruction in the morning. The Confederate sailors celebrated their overwhelming victory, believing that the next day would bring the total annihilation of the Union fleet. They retired to the shelter of Sewell's Point to rest and repair minor damage, confident that nothing on earth could stop them. In Washington City, the news of the disaster arrived by telegraph, causing absolute pandemonium among the leadership. Secretary of War Edwin McMaster Stanton was reportedly pacing his office in a state of near hysteria, fearing that the monster would appear in the Potomac at any moment. He looked out the window, expecting to see the Confederate shellfire raining down on the White House. The sense of vulnerability was total. The United States Navy, the pride of the nation, had been rendered obsolete in a single afternoon. The question on everyone's mind was whether anything could be done to stop this iron juggernaut before it broke the blockade completely. However, help was arriving in the form of the strangest vessel ever to set sail. Late that night, the United States Ship Monitor arrived in Hampton Roads, towed by a tugboat after a perilous journey from New York. Illuminated by the flames of the dying Congress, the Monitor looked nothing like a warship. It had a flat deck that sat only 18 inches above the water and a single revolving turret in the center, housing two massive 11-inch Dahlgren guns. The Confederates would later mock it as a cheesebox on a raft, but it was the brainchild of the brilliant Swedish engineer John Ericsson. It was the only hope the Union had left. The following morning of March 9, 1862, broke with the promise of continued destruction. The Confederate States Ship Virginia steamed out from Sewell's Point, intending to finish off the stranded Minnesota. The Confederate crew was in high spirits, expecting another easy day of target practice against wooden hulls. They did not initially notice the strange, low-profile craft floating in the shadow of the Minnesota. As the Virginia approached the Minnesota to deliver the death blow, the Monitor steamed out to intercept it, placing itself directly between the giant Ironclad and its helpless prey. The stage was set for the first duel between armored warships. Character Bible, Lieutenant John Lorimer Worden is a Caucasian male in his mid-40s with a receding hairline and a full dark beard and mustache. He wears a dark blue Union Navy frock coat with gold buttons and shoulder straps. His expression is serious and determined. On board the Monitor, Lieutenant John Lorimer Worden stood in the small iron pilot house located near the bow. He peered through the narrow viewing slits, watching the massive shape of the Virginia looming closer. Worden knew that his ship was unproven and that many naval experts had predicted it would sink immediately upon firing its guns. Yet he gave the order to commence firing. The turret rotated with a mechanical grinding noise, bringing the heavy guns to bear. A puff of white smoke erupted from the turret, and a solid shot slammed into the Virginia. The sound was deafening, ringing against the iron plates like a colossal bell. The Confederate commander, Catasby Ap Roger Jones, who had taken over after Buchanan was wounded the previous day, was stunned. The shot from the Monitor did not penetrate, but it cracked the armor and shook the entire vessel. The Virginia returned fire, bringing its broadside to bear on the tiny Union ship. But the Monitor presented a minuscule target. Most of the Confederate shells flew over the low deck and splashed into the water. Those that did hit the turret glanced off the curved surface, spinning away harmlessly. It became immediately apparent that this battle would be unlike anything seen in the history of naval warfare. For hours, the two iron champions circled each other in a slow, deadly dance. The Virginia was heavy and difficult to maneuver, taking nearly half an hour to turn a full circle. The Monitor was more agile, turning quickly to bring its turret to bear on the enemy. Inside the turret of the Monitor, the crew labored in a hellish environment of smoke and noise. They struggled to load the heavy guns while the turret spun, making it difficult to keep their orientation. They fired as rapidly as they could, hoping to find a weak spot in the armor of the Confederate Goliath. The battle raged at point-blank range, with the ships sometimes touching each other. The Virginia, finding its guns ineffective against the Monitor, attempted to ram the smaller vessel. It was a desperate move reminiscent of ancient galley warfare. The Virginia surged forward, its engines straining, but the Monitor turned sharply at the last second. The blow was a glancing one, and the Virginia's prow merely slid along the iron overhang of the Monitor's deck. The lack of an iron ram which had been broken off inside the Cumberland the day before prevented the Virginia from doing significant damage. Inside the pilot house, Lieutenant John Lorimer Worden directed the fight with cool professionalism. He communicated with the turret crew through a speaking tube, coordinating their fire. The situation was chaotic, and the noise of the impacts was disorienting. Every time a shell struck the pilot house, dust and iron splinters filled the air. Worden knew that a direct hit on his viewing slit could be fatal, but he remained at his post, refusing to seek safety. He understood that the survival of the Minnesota and the blockade depended entirely on his actions. On the Confederate States Ship Virginia, the situation was becoming critical. The ship was leaking from the damage sustained the previous day, and its ammunition was running low. The engineers struggled to keep up steam pressure, as the smokestack had been riddled with holes, causing the draft to fail. The crew was exhausted from 2 days of continuous combat. Despite pounding the monitor repeatedly, they could not disable the strange little ship. They switched to firing solid shot, attempting to crack the turret, but the high-quality iron of the monitor held firm against the barrage. Then a stroke of luck favored the Confederates. A shell from the Virginia exploded directly against the viewing slit of the monitor's pilot house. Lieutenant John Lorimer Worden took the full force of the explosion in his face. Blinded by powder burns and iron fragments, he collapsed, bleeding profusely. For a few moments, the monitor was without a commander, drifting aimlessly as the helmsman struggled to regain control. The crew in the turret, unaware of the disaster, continued to load the guns, waiting for orders that did not come. The executive officer Samuel Dana Green rushed from the turret to the pilot house to take command. He found Worden in agony, but still conscious, asking if the Minnesota was safe. Green took the helm and steered the monitor into shallow water to assess the damage and attend to the wounded commander. Seeing the monitor retreat, the Confederates on the Virginia believed they had finally won the day. However, the Virginia was deep in the water and the tide was falling. The pilots warned that if they stayed any longer, they would run aground and be trapped. Believing the monitor had been driven off and seeing that the Minnesota was still out of reach due to the tides, the Virginia turned back toward Norfolk. The Confederate crew cheered, claiming a tactical victory. When the monitor returned to the fighting area a short time later, they found the enemy gone. The battle ended not with a decisive sinking, but with a mutual withdrawal. Both sides claimed victory. The Confederates had destroyed 2 major Union ships, and the Union had saved the rest of the fleet and stopped the Ironclad threat. The immediate aftermath of the Battle of Hampton Roads was a strategic stalemate. The Confederate States Ship Virginia remained a potent threat in keeping the Union fleet cautious and preventing a direct naval assault on Richmond up the James River. However, the presence of the United States ship Monitor neutralized the offensive power of the Virginia. The Confederate ironclad could never again venture out to destroy the wooden blockade runners with impunity. The blockade of Norfolk remained intact, suffocating the Confederate supply lines. News of the battle flashed across the Atlantic Ocean, reaching the naval powers of Europe. In London and Paris, admirals and shipwrights read the reports with grim realization. The Royal Navy, the most powerful fleet in the world, instantly realized that their vast armada of wooden ships of the line was now obsolete. The Times of London famously remarked that the British Navy had been reduced from over 100 ships to just 2, the Warrior and the Black Prince, their only ironclads. The clash at Hampton Roads had rendered centuries of naval tradition worthless overnight. John Ericsson, the designer of the Monitor, became a national hero in the North. His innovative turret design became the standard for all future battleships. The word Monitor became a generic term for a class of shallow-draft turreted ironclads that the Union Navy rushed into production. These vessels would go on to serve in rivers and harbors throughout the rest of the war, playing a crucial role in the Union victory. The Monitor had proven that a small, technologically advanced ship could stand up to a much larger adversary. The fate of the two combatants was ultimately tragic. The Confederate States Ship Virginia never fought again. 2 months later, as Union troops advanced on Norfolk, the Confederates were forced to evacuate the city. The Virginia had a deep draft and could not travel up the river to Richmond. Unwilling to let their prize fall into Union hands, the crew ran the ship aground and set her on fire. On the morning of May 11th, the flames reached the magazine, and the Virginia exploded, scattering her iron plating across the water. The United States Ship Monitor did not survive much longer. Designed for calm harbor waters, it was not seaworthy in the open ocean. In December of 1862, while being towed south to North Carolina, the Monitor was caught in a gale off Cape Hatteras. The waves crashed over the low deck, and water poured into the vessel through vents and the turret ring. Despite the heroic efforts of the crew, the pumps were overwhelmed. The Monitor sank beneath the waves, taking 16 brave sailors with her to the bottom of the Atlantic. Decades passed, and the story of the Ironclads became legend. The wreck of the Monitor lay undiscovered for over a century, a tomb for the men who died there. It was not until 1973 that the site was located and designated as the first national marine sanctuary in the United States. In a remarkable engineering feat, the turret of the Monitor was recovered in 2002. It now sits in a conservation tank at the Mariners Museum in Virginia, where scientists work to preserve the iron that once deflected Confederate cannonballs. The legacy of the Battle of Hampton Roads extends far beyond the Civil War. It marked the birth of the modern Navy. The principles demonstrated that day: armor protection, rotating turrets, and steam power became the foundation of warship design for the next 80 years. The dreadnoughts of World War I and the battleships of World War II can all trace their lineage back to that strange cheesebox on a raft and the barn roof that fought in the Virginia waters. Lieutenant John Lorimer Worden eventually recovered from his injuries, though he lost sight in one eye and was permanently scarred. He went on to have a distinguished naval career, eventually rising to the rank of Rear Admiral. He was celebrated as the man who saved the Union fleet in its darkest hour. His courage in the pilot house of the Monitor remains a testament to the human spirit that operates the machines of war. The technology changes, but the bravery required to face the fire remains the same. Today, the calm waters of Hampton Roads give little indication of the violence that once erupted there. Modern aircraft carriers and nuclear submarines now pass over the spot where the Monitor and the Virginia clashed. Yet for those who know the history, the air is still thick with the smoke of black powder and the clang of iron on iron. It was here that the future arrived with a thunderous roar, changing the world forever. The clash of the Ironclads was more than just a battle, it was a turning point in human history. It demonstrated the terrifying power of industrial technology when applied to destruction. It was the moment when the romantic age of sail finally died, replaced by the cold, hard reality of the machine age. As we look back on that day, we are reminded that innovation often comes from the crucible of conflict, and that the world can change in the blink of an eye. The story of the Monitor and the Virginia serves as a powerful reminder of the ingenuity and resilience of the people involved. From the designers who conceived these radical machines to the sailors who fought inside them, they were pioneers of a new frontier. They stepped into the unknown, trusting in iron and steam to protect them. Their sacrifice and their struggle paved the way for the technological marvels that we take for granted today. As the sun sets over the Chesapeake Bay, casting long shadows across the water, one can almost hear the ghostly echo of cannons. The Ironclads are gone, their hulls rusted away or scrapped, but their spirit remains. They stand as silent sentinels at the gateway to the modern world, guarding the memory of the day when iron first met iron in anger. The whisper of time speaks their names, ensuring that they will never be forgotten.